The Hidden Order: Secrets Beneath the Civil War. Author's note. Now I begin the story, a story buried beneath the smoke of the American Civil War, hidden in the shadows of history, waiting to be told. Chapter 1: The Blood and the Silence. September 18, 1862. Sharpsburg, Maryland. The morning after Antietam was not a morning at all. It was a shroud of smoke and rot, a low fog that carried the stench of gunpowder, blood, and burned corn. The sun struggled to rise through a gray sky thick with ash. Dr. Jonathan Letterman, medical director of the Army of the Potomac, stood ankle-deep in crimson mud, his hands trembling from exhaustion and morphine fumes. Over 23,000 men had fallen in a single day, more than any battle America had ever known. He had walked among them all, boys no older than 17, faces gray with death, bodies mangled beyond recognition. The roar of cannon fire was gone now, but its echo lived in his skull. Every gust of wind sounded like a scream. Dr. Letterman called a young assistant surgeon, his voice hoarse. "We've found something. Sir, you might want to see this." He turned. The man pointed toward the edge of the battlefield, beyond the sunken road where bodies lay stacked like cordwood. Past the burned fences, a line of trees concealed a depression in the earth, a narrow sinkhole half filled with mud and rainwater. Inside it glimmered something metallic. He followed the surgeon, boots squelching through the muck, and knelt beside the hole. The object was not a weapon, nor a shell fragment. It was a rusted iron seal, bearing the faint engraving of a serpent coiled around a sword, an insignia he had never seen before. "What regiment carried this?" Letterman asked. "None that I know of, sir," replied the assistant. "But there's more. A tunnel. We think it leads somewhere." Letterman frowned. "A tunnel? Here?" The surgeon nodded grimly. "The men who dug it were found dead inside, Union and Confederate both." A strange chill crept up Letterman's spine. He motioned for a lantern and descended into the opening, the smell of wet earth and decay closing around him. The narrow shaft was reinforced with oak planks and iron bolts, too precise to be improvised. It sloped downward into darkness, ending at a wooden door marked with a burned symbol, the same serpent and sword. He pressed his hand against the wood. It was warm. Inside, the air reeked of chemicals, ether, alcohol, formalin. There were tables covered with surgical tools, glass vials, notebooks, and something else. Human remains preserved in jars. And at the far end, beneath a Confederate flag darkened by smoke, a stack of sealed documents marked RP, Property of the Bureau of Medical Intelligence. Letterman's breath caught. Medical intelligence? There was no such bureau in any army. He opened one of the folders. Inside were anatomical sketches of human lungs, but twisted, experiments on how long tissue could survive without oxygen, annotated in precise handwriting. Another page detailed Project Eirene, referring to an experimental serum intended to suspend life for medical transport. Beneath it, a single line read, "Dr. E. Pendleton, Richmond Division, Subterranean Facility 9. Do not remove files without authorization." Letterman stepped back. Pendleton. The name stirred a memory. Dr. Elias Pendleton, a brilliant Confederate surgeon who had vanished months earlier, rumored to have been captured and executed. But this was no field hospital. It was a laboratory, one that should not exist. Footsteps echoed from above. "Sir," the assistant called, "Confederate patrols approaching." Letterman grabbed the documents and shoved them into his satchel. As he turned to leave, his lantern flickered, just long enough to reveal something written on the wall in chalk, half erased by moisture. "Beneath the blood, a new nation will be born." He froze, the words searing into his mind. Outside, artillery thundered again in the distance. The war was far from over. But for Dr. Jonathan Letterman, something far more dangerous had just begun. A secret that would force him to question everything he thought he knew about the war, about medicine, and about the men who claimed to serve their country in the name of science. He climbed out of the tunnel, clutching the satchel, as the first rays of sunlight cut through the smoke. The Battle of Antietam was history now, but what he had found beneath it would change history forever. Chapter 2. The Man from Richmond. October 2, 1862, Washington, D.C. Rain hammered the windows of the War Department building as Dr. Jonathan Letterman stood before a table crowded with maps, casualty reports, and coffee-stained telegrams. The Capitol still smelled of gun oil and damp uniforms. Soldiers limped through the corridors with bandaged arms and hollow eyes. Washington was a city held together by exhaustion and paper. Across from him sat Major General George B. McClellan, his blue coat immaculate, his expression unreadable. "You're certain of what you found? A tunnel under the Antietam field?" "Yes, sir," Letterman replied. "Reinforced, deliberate, and not of Union origin." McClellan tapped his pen against the desk. "You retrieved documents?" "Some." Letterman pulled a folder from his satchel, only one of the many he had taken, and slid it across the table. "Sketches, notes, chemical compositions, Confederate markings, but the language is peculiar. It reads more like an experiment than a military report." McClellan flipped through the pages, his brows knitting. "Project Eirene. Suspension of life? Temporary biological cessation." He looked up sharply. "Are you suggesting they're experimenting on men?" "I'm suggesting," Letterman said carefully, "that someone is using this war for purposes beyond victory." The general's eyes narrowed. "You realize how that sounds?" "Insane, I know. But the facility was real. The men inside, Union and Confederate, were dead, yes, but not from gunfire. They were drained, like their blood had been removed deliberately." The room fell silent, except for the rain. McClellan closed the folder and exhaled. "You will speak of this to no one, Doctor, not even to your staff." "Sir, if this is true—" "I said no one." McClellan's voice hardened. "There are rumors enough in this city. You bring me evidence, not ghost stories." He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "Dismissed." Letterman gathered his papers, his jaw tightening. He had expected skepticism, but not outright dismissal. As he turned to leave, McClellan added quietly, "Doctor, burn those files. The men who built that tunnel are all dead. Best let the dead keep their secrets." Outside, the storm had broken into mist. The gas lamps along Pennsylvania Avenue glowed like faint embers through the fog.
Letterman walked quickly, head down, his satchel pressed close to his chest. He had not burned the files. He couldn't. There were still questions, and he needed answers. He returned to his quarters near the Armory Square Hospital, where the air reeked of carabolic acid and lamp oil. Soldiers groaned in their beds as nurses passed with basins of bloodied water. It was the closest thing to order in the chaos of war, and yet even here he felt watched. He locked his door and spread the documents across his desk. The writing was neat but foreign, Confederate script, precise and coded. Diagrams of nerves, cross-sections of hearts, strange formulas that mentioned stabilization of cellular decay. In the margin of one page, a note caught his eye. EP requests further samples from Richmond Laboratory before continuation. Notify through Meridian Post. EP. Elias Pendleton. The name again. Letterman leaned back, thinking. Pendleton had been a Confederate medical officer attached to Richmond's research hospitals. His disappearance in 1861 had stirred whispers even among Union doctors. Rumors of bizarre experiments conducted under the supervision of the Confederate High Command. Some said he was working on a cure for gangrene. Others claimed he was developing a serum to make soldiers immune to pain. But an underground lab beneath Antietam? That was something else entirely. A knock startled him. "Who is it?" "It's Nurse Parker, sir. You have a visitor." "A visitor? At this hour?" "Yes, sir. Says he's from the Sanitary Commission. Urgent business." Letterman frowned. "Send him in." The door opened to reveal a tall man in a dark coat, his face half hidden by a wet-brimmed hat. He carried no lantern, no papers, only a faint smell of tobacco and rain. "Dr. Letterman," he said, his tone calm but deliberate. "My name is Thomas Hale. May I sit?" Letterman gestured to the chair. "You're with the Sanitary Commission." Hale smiled thinly. "In a manner of speaking, my work involves special correspondence between departments." He reached into his coat and produced a small brass token. Etched on it was a serpent coiled around a sword. Letterman's blood ran cold. It was the same signia he had found in the tunnel. "Where did you get that?" he demanded. Hale turned the token between his fingers. "From the same place you did, Doctor. Only I wasn't supposed to let you find it." "What do you mean?" Hale leaned forward, his voice lowering. "You've seen things meant to stay buried. That tunnel, what you found there, was part of an operation older than this war, older than either flag you serve." Letterman stared at him, disbelief warring with curiosity. "Operation? You mean the Confederate lab?" "I mean the order," Hale said softly. "A network of physicians and engineers working for both sides, under the guise of war. Men like Pendleton were not traitors or patriots. They were seekers, funded by powerful interests to push the boundaries of human endurance." Letterman's throat tightened. "You're saying both the Union and the Confederacy are—" "Pawns," Hale interrupted. "Different uniforms, same masters." He reached into his coat again and laid a folded parchment on the table. Its seal was cracked and yellowed. "This," Hale said, "is a list of laboratories. There are 9 across the states. The one beneath Antietam was merely an outpost." Letterman unfolded the parchment. Names leapt out. Richmond, Savannah, Baltimore, even Chicago, each marked with symbols. Beneath the last entry were 3 words scrawled in ink. Project Eirene, final phase pending. "What is Project Eirene?" he asked. Hale's eyes flickered toward the window, scanning the street beyond. "A dream," he said finally. "A way to end death itself. The Confederates saw it as a weapon, soldiers who could not die. The Union wanted it as salvation, a means to save their wounded. But the men funding it," he hesitated, "they wanted something else." Before Letterman could speak, Hale stood. "I shouldn't have come. They'll know I've talked to you." "Who will?" Hale gave a weary smile. "The ones who built the tunnel." He turned to leave, but stopped at the door. "If you value your life, Doctor, destroy the documents. The war you think you're fighting is only half of the truth." The door shut behind him. For hours Letterman sat in silence. The lamps burned low, the papers spread before him like fragments of madness. Could any of it be true? Could Pendleton still be alive, working beneath Richmond in some hidden chamber? He rose and went to the window. Outside, the fog rolled over the Potomac like ghostly smoke. Somewhere across that river, men were dying under his care. Men who believed they fought for honor, for freedom, for the Union. And yet, if Hale was right, their blood was being used for something darker.
Letterman turned back to the parchment. 9 laboratories. Project Eirene. He traced a finger over the word Richmond. That was where it began, and where it must end. He would not destroy the documents. He would uncover the truth. October 20, 1862, en route to Richmond. The wagon creaked over the Virginia road, wheels biting into mud thick as glue. Letterman sat in the back beneath a tarp, dressed as a field surgeon for the Army of the James. The air smelled of pine and smoke. Somewhere far off, cannon fire murmured like distant thunder. He carried no weapon, only his satchel, the papers, and a forged travel pass signed by McClellan's adjutant. Officially, he was inspecting hospital conditions along the front. Unofficially, he was chasing a ghost. At dusk, the wagon halted near a ruined farmhouse outside Fredericksburg. Its chimney stood crooked against the sky, the walls scorched black. Letterman climbed down, stretching stiff limbs, when he noticed something etched into the stone lintel, the serpent and sword. He froze. Hale's words echoed in his head. Inside, the floorboards were warped and littered with broken bottles, but beneath them, faint air flowed upward, a draft from below. He found a trap door under a collapsed table, its handle rusted but intact. With effort, he pried it open. A staircase descended into darkness. Lantern in hand, he went down slowly. The walls were brick, the air damp. It wasn't a cellar. It was a corridor. A faint hum filled the air, like wind moving through pipes. Then came the smell. Ether, alcohol, decay. The passage opened into a chamber lined with medical tables and glass cylinders. Inside the cylinders floated bodies, men in tattered uniforms, suspended in cloudy fluid. Their eyes were closed, their skin pale as wax. He nearly dropped the lantern. Each cylinder was labeled Specimen 04, Neural Suspension. Specimen 09, Pulmonary Failure Recovery, EP Supervision. And there, on the far wall, a new mark, Facility 2 of 9. Letterman stepped closer. One of the bodies twitched. He stumbled back, the lantern shaking in his hand. The eyes of the soldier inside the tank fluttered open. For an instant, the lips moved, forming a word that froze Letterman's blood. Eirene. The lantern fell and shattered. Flames leapt up along the floorboards.
Letterman scrambled up the stairs, choking on smoke. Behind him, the chamber roared as the fire consumed the lab. He burst into the night, gasping. The farmhouse burnt bright against the darkening sky, and he could hear the muffled cries from beneath, whether human or something else, he couldn't tell. He turned away, clutching his satchel. The papers were still with him. The proof still lived. Somewhere ahead lay Richmond, and the man who had started it all. As dawn rose over the blackened Virginia fields, Dr. Jonathan Letterman made a silent vow. He would find Dr. Elias Pendleton, expose the truth behind Project Eirene, and end whatever monstrous dream had been born in the name of science. But in the shadows behind him, unseen through the drifting smoke, a figure on horseback watched him ride away. A man in a gray officer's coat, holding a brass token marked with a serpent and a sword.
Chapter 3. The Hidden Chamber. The storm had rolled in quietly that night, washing the muddy encampment in cold sheets of rain. Clara Barton stood beneath the eave of the surgeon's tent, watching the water streak down like ghostly fingers on the canvas. Behind her, wounded men groaned in their sleep, the damp air thick with the smell of iodine and smoke. She had learned to ignore it, until the smell of metal crept in. Iron, rust, and something else. Ozone, sharp and biting. "Dr. Ashcroft," she whispered, turning to the tall man hunched over a lantern-lit table. "Do you smell that?" He didn't look up. His hands were busy sketching something, an elaborate diagram that spread across a torn field map. "Yes," he said softly. "It's stronger when the rain falls. The earth beneath us conducts it." "Conducts what?" He lifted his eyes, and for a moment, Clara thought she saw fear there. Power. Before she could question him, the tent flap burst open. A soldier, soaked to the bone, stumbled in, his eyes wild. "Doctor, Miss Barton, you'd better come see this." They followed him through the camp, past the flickering lamps and the sleeping forms of men too weak to move. The rain had slowed, leaving behind a low mist that hugged the ground. The soldier led them to the ravine edge where the explosion had first torn the earth days ago. Clara gasped. The hole had widened, almost doubled in size. The mud had given way, exposing a shaft, a circular tunnel reinforced with something dark and metallic, unlike any iron she had seen. It descended into blackness. Dr. Ashcroft knelt at the edge, his lantern casting amber light into the void. The walls shimmered faintly, as if alive with some residual energy. "This is it," he murmured. "This is what I felt." "Felt?" Clara asked. He pointed to the tunnel's inner ring. Etched into the metal were symbols, not military insignias, but geometric patterns, repeating with mathematical precision. "Magnetic resonance," he said, tracing them. "But this shouldn't exist in 1833. Clara frowned. "What are you saying?" He said, "I'm saying," his voice barely audible over the wind, "someone has built something here, something centuries ahead of us." They descended carefully, the rope slick with rain. The deeper they went, the colder it became, until Clara's breath came out in white puffs. The lantern flickered, light bouncing off the walls, revealing lines of copper tubing and strange glass bulbs embedded into the structure. When they finally reached the bottom, the tunnel opened into a chamber, a massive underground room, circular and humming faintly like a heartbeat. At its center stood a steel pedestal supporting a sealed crate about the size of a trunk. Strange symbols, Greek, Latin, and something unrecognizable were carved into its lid. Dr. Ashcroft approached slowly. "This is government work, but not ours." "What do you mean?" He hesitated.
In 1858, I worked briefly with the Smithsonian. On an expedition in Virginia, we uncovered a cache of devices buried near a colonial fort. The designs were impossible. Self-illuminating materials, metals lighter than air. The report was buried, classified. And now, this. Clara stepped closer, brushing her fingers along the lid. It was cold, unnaturally so. Could this be Confederate? No, Ashcroft said. Something older. He unlatched the crate. The hinges hissed open, releasing a faint blue vapor that coiled like mist. Inside was a leather-bound journal wrapped in oilcloth, and beneath it, an object shaped like a compass, but with no needle. Instead, it had a glass disc engraved with shifting lines that moved on their own, rearranging as though alive. Clara stepped back. "What is it?" He didn't answer. He opened the journal. The writing inside was meticulous, each page filled with diagrams and cryptic annotations in multiple languages. At the top of the first page, a name was scrawled. Dr. Elias Wren, War Department, 1812. Clara frowned. War Department? That's 50 years ago. Ashcroft nodded slowly, eyes wide. It means the government has been hiding this for decades. Whatever they found in 1812, they've been building on it ever since. A sound echoed from the tunnel, boots scraping on stone. They extinguished the lantern instantly. Silence. Then voices. They're down here, the doctor and the nurse. Clara's heart slammed in her chest. She recognized that voice. It was Lieutenant Marsh, the intelligence officer, who'd been questioning soldiers all week about missing supply crates. Ashcroft closed the journal and slipped it under his coat. We have to go, now. They backed toward the far wall, searching for another exit. The humming grew louder, vibrating through the floor. The strange compass-like device began to glow faintly in Clara's hands, pulsing in rhythm with the sound. Then the wall behind them shifted, not crumbled, shifted, like a door opening in stone. Ashcroft turned in awe. It's responding to the device. The hidden passage revealed a narrow corridor lined with rusted pipes and conduits that seemed to vanish into darkness. Without hesitation, they slipped inside, just as a lantern beam cut across the chamber behind them. "Search everywhere!" Marsh's voice barked. Clara and Ashcroft ran. The corridor twisted and sloped downward until the air turned thick and damp. The glow from the device was their only light. After what felt like hours, they stumbled into a secondary chamber, smaller, filled with rows of glass cylinders, each containing a silvery liquid that shimmered even in darkness. Ashcroft approached one, his hand trembling. "Mercury," he whispered, "but it's moving." Clara stared as the liquid swirled on its own, forming patterns, lines and shapes, the same as those etched into the tunnel walls. "It's alive," she said, before realizing the words had slipped out. He shook his head slowly. "Not alive, intelligent." Before they could study it further, a low hum rose from the walls, this time not mechanical, but resonant, almost vocal. The air quivered. The cylinders began to vibrate. Ashcroft grabbed her arm. "We have to leave, now." They turned back toward the corridor, only to see Marsh and two soldiers blocking the way, rifles aimed. "Hand over the journal," he said, his voice steady, but his eyes gleaming with something darker than greed. Ashcroft raised his hands. "You don't understand what this is. That thing in the chest, it's not a weapon. It's a power source, something the world isn't ready for." Marsh smirked. "Then it's perfect for war." He stepped forward. Before anyone could move, the floor beneath them shuddered violently. The cylinder shattered, and the silvery liquid poured across the floor, flowing like mercury rivers toward the pedestal. The glow intensified, filling the chamber with blinding white light. Clara screamed. The last thing she saw before everything went white was Dr. Ashcroft reaching toward the compass device, shouting her name. Then, silence.
Chapter 4. The Silence. Clara awoke to the sound of dripping water and the slow, rhythmic echo of something metallic. Her vision swam in shades of gray. The air was thick, almost gelatinous, and her ears rang with a high, constant tone. For a moment, she thought she'd gone deaf. Then, breathing. Not hers. Someone else's. She rolled onto her side. Dr. Ashcroft was lying a few feet away, his face pale, his coat torn open. The journal had spilled from his hands, pages fluttering weakly in the draft. The compass-like device lay beside it, pulsing faintly with blue light. "Doctor," she rasped, crawling toward him. "Can you hear me?" His eyes flickered open. "Clara?" "Yes." He sat up slowly, wincing as he touched a bleeding plot on his temple. "Where are we?" She looked around. The chamber was no longer the same. The shattered glass, the mercury cylinders, they were gone. The walls had changed color, smooth and metallic, like forged steel. A faint light emanated from lines running along the ceiling, as though the very structure glowed from within. "It's alive," Clara whispered. Ashcroft picked up the compass device, which now spun slowly, its glass face emitting a steady hum. "I think we triggered something, a system still buried under the battlefield." "You mean it's working?" "Yes." He pointed toward a large archway that hadn't been there before, carved perfectly into the metal wall. Beyond it, a tunnel stretched into a bluish haze. They stood, still dazed, and began walking toward the light. The tunnel was strangely warm, its air humming with unseen energy. They passed strange panels embedded in the walls, smooth surfaces with symbols that glowed when they walked near them. "Is it possible," Clara asked, "that someone built all this before the war? Before us?" Ashcroft hesitated. "Possible? No. But it's here, which means everything we thought we knew about history might be wrong." They reached a circular platform at the end of the tunnel. In its center stood a massive disc-like mechanism half buried under debris. Thick cables, no, roots of metal spread outward from it, burrowing deep into the walls. Clara ran her hand along one of them. "It feels warm, like it's breathing." Ashcroft knelt near the disc, examining a small panel covered with strange markings. This could be some kind of engine, a gradient generator unlike anything we've seen. The question is, what does it power? Before Clara could reply, the floor trembled. A deep, resonant tone rolled through the chamber like thunder. The lines on the walls flared blue light, and the compass in Ashcroft's hand spun violently. "Step back!" he shouted. A beam of light shot upward from the disc, scattering across the ceiling, forming a holographic projection, faint, distorted, but unmistakably human. A man's silhouette, cloaked, and speaking in a voice that wavered through static. "If this record is found, then the experiment has failed. We are beneath Gettysburg, what remains of the Philadelphia Division. This device must never reach Washington. They will use it to end the war and begin another far worse." The projection flickered, showing diagrams of the device, the same disc marked with the same sigils. Ashcroft's eyes widened. Philadelphia Division? That's a War Department branch. Secret. It was dissolved in 1849 after an explosion destroyed half their lab. The voice continued. Dr. Elias Wren signing off.
If any should find this, remember this machine was not built for destruction, but for preservation. It carries the memory of this land, of every soul fallen upon it. To awaken it is to awaken the past itself." The light faded. Silence again. Clara stared at the place where the figure had been. "Preservation," she said. "What did he mean?" Ashcroft was pale. "I think it means this machine stores consciousness, memory of the dead." She shivered. "You mean—" He nodded. "Every soldier buried here, every man who fell, their essence imprinted in this field soil. Wren found a way to capture it." The floor trembled again, stronger this time. From the far wall, steam hissed as a section of the metal shifted open, revealing another passage. Dim orange light flickered beyond it, and the faint echo of footsteps followed. Clara gripped his arm. "They're coming back." Ashcroft grabbed the journal and the compass. "Then we need to finish what Wren started before they do." They ducked into the new corridor, descending deeper into the earth. The walls grew narrower, the hum louder. Pipes pulsed with liquid light. At the end of the passage stood a massive door, round, sealed with a wheel-like lock. Symbols ran along its rim, glowing faintly. In the center, a slot perfectly matched the compass device's shape. Ashcroft looked at Clara. "It fits." "Then open it." He pressed the device into place. It clicked, then began to rotate on its own. The door shuddered, groaned, and slowly slid open, revealing a cavernous chamber filled with rows of strange metallic coffins, hundreds of them, stacked along the walls like archives. Clara's voice caught in her throat. "God help us." Ashcroft walked forward, trembling. He brushed the dust from one of the coffin's glass lids and froze. Inside lay a soldier in a Union uniform, perfectly preserved as though asleep. He checked another, Confederate. Then another, a nurse, a child. "He's pale," Ashcroft whispered. "They're all here, not dead, suspended." The hum around them deepened, rhythmic, like hundreds of hearts beating in unison. The air felt electric. Ashcroft turned to Clara. "This is what Wren meant by preservation. He didn't just record their memory, he preserved their bodies." Before she could respond, a voice echoed from the doorway behind them. "Step away from the pods, Doctor." They turned. Lieutenant Marsh stood there, his face smeared with soot and a pistol in hand. Behind him were two soldiers, lanterns raised. "You should have left when you had the chance, but now I'll take the machine myself." Ashcroft held his ground. "You don't know what you're dealing with." Marsh smiled coldly. "I don't need to. I just need it to work." He raised his gun. The hum rose again, louder, deeper, until the floor began to pulse. The coffins glowed from within. Then, one by one, their lids began to open.